Patricia13 says, I think it'll be more difficult to pull the wool over our eyes when we can openly discuss what's going on around us. Is it?
I think that there are other sources of information now, and that is so important. That there is, I mean, for example, this conversation here, all that you're doing, that the traditional gatekeepers are being challenged themselves. We have to turn to other sources of information. We see the same thing happening, the hype around Iran. You see sometimes the same writers, and we have to trust the administration, they say. The administration that is more open when the media demands that they be more open. As is pointed out, President Obama has gone after whistleblowers, more whistleblowers than all presidents combined in history. High-level whistleblowers, for example, in the NSA, the National Security Agency, the agency a number of times larger than the CIA, who dedicate their lives to what they believe is national security, and then they start to see, wait a second, what are we doing? We're simply increasing our ability to spy on Americans, and one by one they blow the whistle, and one by one they're prosecuted.
And I would also say that it's important that, let's stick to Iraq for a second before talking about Obama, whether it's on drones or Iran, and how he's perpetuating that same narrative, and how he justifies it, again, using that imminent threat doctrine that Bush really ushered in. If we focus on Iraq, the media, and Amy, I would hope you agree, of course, not your show, because I would echo all of their compliments. I mean, this is part of the reason I went into journalism, is watching people like you just being so steadfast in your career and in challenging power. But when we focus on Iraq, we're failing every single day.
Wait, what do you mean? Today?
In America, today,
by focusing on Iraq or by not focusing on Iraq?
By focusing on Iraq, well, first of all, we don't focus on Iraq.
That's right.
And when we do focus on Iraq, we don't cover what matters. We don't frame it. As Amy said, the press, whether it's citizen journalists or professional journalists like us, the press's job is to challenge conventional wisdom, to challenge what your government is telling you. Checks and balances. What about Congress's job? When it comes to Iraq, the unspeakable violence, 4 million people displaced, over 120,000 killed, not to compare, but 3,000 people killed on 9/11, to somehow justify a connection that doesn't exist, killing 120,000 people. There are birth defects in Iraq skyrocketing in terms of the rates. There are cancer rates that are skyrocketing. We don't often present the role the U.S. played in flaming sectarian divisions, not just in Iraq, but in the region. Quite the contrary, we see the media, when it talks about Iraq, some people in the media are willing to use Iraq as perhaps a reason, a spark for why we saw all these other Arab uprisings, which could not be further from the truth. The reason there are so many sectarian divisions is, if not specifically and primarily because of the Iraq invasion. I mean, these levels of sectarian divisions, as someone who grew up in this region, are unprecedented.
But Ahmed, I also just want to underline the difference between making a good reasoned case, and you know that I agree with you on all of those issues, but a reasoned conservative case can be made against them. What's much more important for people to get right are facts.
What do you think, when Josh says we need to, there are facts, we need to focus on the facts, sometimes if the facts are so shrouded in secrecy, how do we do that?
Well, I think you have to go to where the silence is. You have to do like Jeremy Scahill does. He goes to Yemen. He interviews the Alaki family. He goes to Somalia. He goes to Afghanistan, to Gardez, to where a family has been wiped out by the JSOC, by the Joint Special Operations Command, by the Special Forces of the U.S. It's our job not to rally around the president in a time of war, but to ask the most serious questions. And, for young people, let's say high school kids who are watching right now, I say, what you have to watch out for is peer pressure in high school. You have to find your own way. It is the hardest thing to do. And in the same way, when you grow up and you're in the White House press corps in Washington and you're in that press room, you have to watch out for the same thing, peer pressure. And it's not only peer pressure, oh, what are they going to think if I ask the tough question? We have to watch out for the access of evil. That's trading truth for access, right? You're sitting with the White House press corps and you're asking the softball question because maybe you will then get an interview with President Obama because you asked a softie. No, it is not worth the access. The politicians need journalists more than journalists need politicians. We have to be the exception to the rulers. There's a reason why our profession is the only one explicitly protected by the U.S. Constitution. We're supposed to be the check and balance on power.